Who's the wisest person you ever knew? What did you learn from them?
That is a difficult question. As a child, I thought my grandfather was just a god among men. He was just the kind of person that made an impact on you. It wasn't that he was so funny or anything, but he seemed to be wise, and he seemed to always have the answer, and he explained things. And my mom she did not like my grandfather, and so I had kind of it ended up making me not like my mom, because I liked my grandfather so much, and the things that she said about him didn't hold true for my way of thinking, and I formed my own standards. And I don't know why, but because I didn't have any outside input, I learned that I made up my own standards, and that played really well for me with Christianity, because this is the right way, this is the right way, this is what you do, and I just imprinted with those. But I thought my grandfather was just amazing. I loved and adored him. And then the other person, I don't know whether it'd be the wisest, but the impact was my Sunday school teacher when I was in maybe 4th and 5th grade. And she took me under her wing, and she made me feel smart and worthwhile and valuable. And that was the first time.
That's really important.
That's the first time that anybody had done that, as far as in my family or anything. And that she was just very impactful. And she used to talk to people in front of me and say, "You watch, this girl's going to have a bright future," which, of course, nobody ever said anything like that. But it imprinted on me in pretty valuable ways, my self-esteem and all of that. So it's a good example of how God still makes a way. I mean, I didn't have a good mother, I didn't have a good father, I didn't have, I loved my brothers, but they weren't good examples or anything. So to have somebody treat me as valuable and smart and everything, it was just very important and helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. That would be. Probably the wisest person, I'd have to say my dad, because I spent a lot of time with him. For a man who didn't even finish the 8th grade, he was a prolific reader. He always read. He always researched when he did something. He had a lot of lifelong friends that he had as sources for information, all the way from some accountants and lawyers to farmers and fishermen and Indians on the reservation. He got information from everybody, and so that gave him a sense of common sense wisdom, which is just kind of the hallmark of growing up and doing things the right way. So yes, he was probably the wisest. It's amazing that after he died, I recognized early on when we were in grade school primarily, where my dad would encourage me on any of the projects I had, no matter how harebrained they were. He would encourage me, well, yeah, you might try this, you might try that, and let me go and wouldn't interfere. Where most of the guys that were like me, that wanted to work or to try things, their fathers always interfered or finished the project, and Dad would just let me go and says, just put the tools away when you're done. And so that was it. Another wise person that helped me a lot was Mr. Otts in high school. He was a biology teacher in high school. And one of the things about him is he always came back to school in the evening about 5 o'clock. From 5 until 9 o'clock, the school was open. He opened the front door and his lab, and we could come in there. And in his lab, he had a photo studio. He had all kinds of cameras, all the equipment and everything to develop film. And so one of the things, if you look through any of our yearbooks, the 1960 yearbook, my brother did that. Don did that one. He laid the whole thing out. They developed all their own pictures at the school, and so he laid them out, then sent them off to the printers to print the annual. And then when I became a sophomore, junior, working with Mr. Otts, I learned all about the cameras. We used press cameras at that time with 5x7 or 4x6 film that we'd slide into the camera and take the pictures on these big negatives. And then we develop the negatives and print the pictures. And one of the neat things about that, working with such a large negative, if you had a big picture of a group, you could pick out one person in a corner and you can blow that up to do an 8x12 and have a real crisp picture. And so that was kind of fun to work with that, because you could pick anything out of this big negative. But I learned how to develop all the negatives. When we were shooting 35 millimeter, we developed those too. We even developed the color ones rather than black and white. And then he just helped anybody who was interested in the photography stuff. So I worked a lot in the dark room developing stuff, and I took the pictures for the annual in the next 2 years. And electronics, he was good in electronics, so we made a CB radio, a shortwave radio rather, not CB. That was before CB. Shortwave, and so we listened to shortwave, and he knew Morse code, and so we could tap Morse code back and forth to each other. But he was kind of an interesting person.
Mr. Otts often was in charge of the lunch in his room, and so he was old always from the beginning, but he was. I could make him laugh. So he enjoyed interacting with me, and he was very, very, very nice, good sense of humor, not joking himself, but responding to humor. So I would entertain him, which was very fun. And he taught me a very important lesson. The apple pie without the cheese is like the kiss without the squeeze.
That sounds like him.
It was.
He was a single man, never married. He drove a 1951 Hudson Hornet, and that was his car. And he was raised in North Dakota.
Anyway, he was a really, we loved having him in there, and he interacted and he had that dry sense of humor. So I adored him, and I think he was pretty fond of me too. He would always, and we used to do proofs. Was it proofs where you'd
get an unknown chemical,
and you had
have to prove it.
Had to figure out what it was, and it was me and somebody else. I don't remember who it was, but we were one of the first to find the answer, which
they gave them the easy ones.
That just totally jerked off of these people here who were like, "Oh yes, we're so smart."
You had salt. We had
no. It was not that easy, but it was really Mr. Ott. You could coax him into.
That reminds me of a practical joke.
Well, don't.
One of a practical joke. In biology class, well, actually in chemistry, we learned how to dissolve oh gosh, I can't remember now,
Good.
a white metal. We would dissolve it, so it'd be a solution. So, and it's phosphorus, and phosphorus ignites in air and moisture. And so we dissolved some shavings of phosphorus in whatever it was we dissolved it in, and we painted the next page in our biology book of Gary Bartlett's book with this stuff. And so we open it up to this chapter and we're going through it, and then we turn the page, and after about 15 seconds of turning the page, it burst into flames. So he's like, no, and then trying to shut it so nobody knows. But there was quite a few of us that knew about it, and we were waiting for it.
That was a
That's a
good
practical
one.
joke.
That was a good one. No doubt.
This is probably not the question to tack this onto, but I want to make sure we get the story of how your grandfather lost his arm.
Absolutely. My grandfather, according to my mom, my grandfather always said that he had it happen as an accident of some kind. I don't know what, remember that. But my mom always said that's not the truth. He got it when they were trying to break up log jams in when they brought in all of the logs from the forestry where they were cutting the trees down, and they floated them in a lot, and sometimes they gathered all together, and for some reason they used dynamite to break up the logs to get them to separate. And he said, but he always told the story that it was when he was throwing the dynamite to break up the logs that it didn't go out of his hand right away, and it blew his arm off up to his elbow. So he was, as long as I knew him, he was already only had one arm. But boy, talk about work! Yeah, he was a real worker, and somehow he could do it. I remember him holding the rake, so when he's doing the gardening and everything, and he was a fabulous gardener, and that was also something that it really imprinted on me that gardening was very valuable, and of course in those days it really was valuable. You did need to do a lot of your own food.
There's also a second story that goes around about him that I had heard over the years, and that was he was fishing with dynamite, and he didn't throw the dynamite out quite quick enough when he was fishing, because fishing with dynamite, they do come to the surface and you just pick them up.